But the key differentiator really for people is privacy. I still can't believe after a decade of doing this that has been an afterthought. But going back to the chat rooms in the early days with Satoshi, everyone would always be like, this isn't really achievable without privacy. So the transparency's always been a bug. And yet everybody has replicated that design feature. I get it. It's very hard to design for privacy, but that's really one of the leading differentiators.
Today, I'm joined by someone who spent the last decade building that very bridge.
Eric Saraniecki is a leading provider of smart contract technology for financial institutions and one of the architects behind the Canton Network, the only public blockchain with on-chain privacy, built to move real-world assets at institutional-grade scale, connecting traditional finance and crypto.
So privacy is this complex, overlapping, asymmetric set of views. When I go to my doctor and I pay for the doctor, I don't want him to find out how much money I have in my bank account. I don't want the bank to know why I went to the doctor. So it's not just at rest or in a simple transfer, it's in composition with other stuff. Who can see what, under what conditions? It can get very complicated. The machinery to design that protocol and for a developer to design what they need in their asset, and again, not lose this global interoperability, is a very tricky thing to get right, and it's not anonymity. I think it's very easy to think about the two extremes. Everybody sees everything, or nobody sees anything about it, but in the middle, there's so much nuance and complexity. It's tricky to kind of find something easy enough for someone to work with, but still delivers those much needed features. Right now, things are going incredibly fast.
Right.
There are some names that will come to market in the next 6 months that will blow people's minds, and the scale at which they come to market will completely catch people off guard.
Welcome to the Ledger podcast. For years, the world of traditional finance and blockchain have felt like they were speaking different languages. One in terms of like decades of regulation, institutional trust, etc., and the other like decentralization, permissionless innovation, etc. But what we can ask ourselves is like, isn't the future these two things like coming together, right? Like creating a bridge between the two, creating like a new layer of trust that allows them to interact seamlessly, securely. So today I'm joined by someone who spent the last decade building that very bridge. So Eric Saraniecki is the co-founder and head of network strategy at Digital Assets, one of the architects behind the Canton Network. He's worked tirelessly to build the institutional grade infrastructure that now is bringing some of the biggest names in finance on-chain. So we're super happy to have you. You've already been to the Ledger office. It's the first time in this podcast room, first time doing a Ledger podcast. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Yeah, we got to peek in here the last time you gave me the full tour, and I was like, I have a feeling we're going to end up over here one day, and here we are.
And it's a special day because today, as you can see, is like Ledger Open. So we have about 2,000 people coming in, and it's the first Ledger Open that we do in 3 years. So it's a big moment for us, but it's also the first time that we hosted here at our headquarters in 106 Rue du Temple. So that makes it even more special. We have about 2,000 people coming in from all over the world. We'll be broadcasting it live. And I know that you are, on a tour of yourself, and because, obviously Open is a moment for us to showcase a lot of what we've been working on for the past year. But you also been on a tour to talk about what you've been working on for the past 10 years, pretty much.
That's right.
So I don't know. We can start by making the abstract tangible, and the word interoperability is used a lot, but it lacks like a strong anchor. For those outside the institutional finance, can you paint a picture of what that fragmented, like siloed world actually looks like? And what are the real-world costs and friction points that exist when every institution is operating on their own island?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, great place to start, because there is this, I think, mistaken belief in the broader, maximally decentralized everything world that when I say, hey, send some money across the world, someone in the middle just sits on it for 3 days, like, oh, I don't want to complete this transaction. I'll just collect the float and I'll just wait and see what happens. I mean, I assure you that people are trying to move these things as fast as they can, but the reality is something that looks simple to you, the user, send Sebastien some money in a different country. Under the hood is many, many systems linked together, built by totally different people. And so we have common standards on how to communicate with each other, but we don't have common standards on what to do with that message. Mm-hmm. I kind of tell this silly anecdote if I text my wife, hey, pick up a gallon of milk on the way home, and she says, okay, great, no problem. that's the same thing that we have in finance. I don't actually know if she picked up a gallon of milk or if she will, if she got the right thing. She just said, great, I got your message. I heard you. I'll do it. And then the process that we have in the real world is we have a consensus mechanism. It's just called reconciliation. So we're constantly reconciling all these disparate systems that have no commonality other in how they communicate with each other. And that is really what's creating the bulk of the friction. There's just a tax at every step that system has to be consistent with the other thing. And that just takes time today.
And was that like one of the first recognitions that you had of there's something to be done there? Or if you go back to the genesis,
the genesis is that I've been in Bitcoin since 2009. I consider myself maxi empathetic, if anything, and that just having this alternative rail to go directly between two entities, that was kind of the genesis and the motivation. But when you get into the actual problem, if you take the time to go speak to the institutions, and I think this is what's so different about DA and Canton from any other ecosystem, is everyone else kind of bit the hype that we're going to disintermediate and reinvent finance across the board. And we don't need to bring any of the TradFi along with us. They'll all die. They'll be dead. They'll be gone. But if you want to be the rails for finance of the future, those entities will be there. The internet didn't kill banks. It made some of them stronger, those that embraced it, and those that didn't. And we got some new entrants that used the technology, but they didn't kill banks. And I think the same thing's going to happen here, where you're not going to have the intermediaries die. They're going to become significantly more efficient. They're going to provide better service to their customers. They still play critical roles. And if you know that your destination is all of finance, the tech has to work for them. So in the process of talking to those entities, I had this realization, I'll never forget it. It was a couple years in. I'm like, I can't find a single system on earth that is the asset and the cash. So like every time stocks settle in the US, I've got some interaction between the DTCC and the Fed at a minimum, let alone all the different custodians on the two different sides, because you have different custodians for cash sometimes than you will for the securities. So you just have so many systems to coordinate. And I think there's this naive expectation from other chains that, well, we'll just get everybody to use one chain and then that's good to go. But if you really take the time to work with these institutions, you recognize that for good reasons, they have to control their infrastructure. So how do we give someone the experience of being on the same chain, the native composable interoperability that we have in things like DeFi, but that they're still in their own control zone, that they still have full configurability over the things that they need to control? And that's really the genesis of the protocol, is just understanding these very, in retrospect, basic but painstakingly learned lessons from these large institutions.
So what you kind of mean is like Ethereum wanted to be like the world's computer kind of thing, but then running into the issue of scalability and speed, etc. And that basically, you cannot have one chain to kind of like rule them all. That's naive.
You can have one protocol that rules them all, but look at, and by the way, I'm extremely empathetic to all these ecosystems. I don't say any of this from like looking down my nose at all. I've had the benefit of growing in parallel alongside them. But if you look at the proliferation of corporate chains and L2s, I mean, they're telling you there's something about mainnet ETH that doesn't work for me. There's some configuration I want to change. I want to pick certain things that I can't do on the mainnet, and that's kind of forcing this proliferation of alternative destinations. To me, it's an indicator that something isn't quite right there in the design. But even forgetting the tech, just conceptually, these things fail. So, for example, if the Fed and EU both wanted to do their own CBDC and they wanted them to be composably interoperable with each other, well, the kind of the EVM and Solana view is, well, great, we'll put them both in the same ledger. Okay, well, did the Fed suddenly partially govern the euro now, or vice versa? So like even very basic things like governance and who sets the standards and when do we upgrade the system and how does it look? You need to allow for a lot more heterogeneity across these systems than the single ledger view does. And so like a lot of people would say, cool, then run your own L2, it's EVM or Solana compliant, and then do a bridge. But a bridge is just a message by a different name. It's reinventing the exact same problem. I can't guarantee the DeFi primitives and the atomicity across chains like I can in one. So you're just kind of making a faster version of the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you're actually solving the problem. So for us, the goal was always very simple. Is when I go talk to this bank or this register or this exchange, I know for a fact they have to run their own infrastructure. They have to have their own configurations. They have to have their own rules. But if we're going to solve a problem here, it has to feel like, act like, and technologically provide the same benefits as if they were on the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the guiding principle of Canton the whole time. Mm. And along the way, a lot of people like to mislabel us a private blockchain because they've seen us building these anchor tenants first. But the network has always been designed to start to tie these things together. So it's, jokingly, I say it's like the way you might have built a strip mall in the 80s and the 90s. Anchor tenants first. You happen to own all the land between them, and then you turn it into a big open mall later.
Yeah, you see that. And it's funny because when you're talking about, the internet didn't kill banking, I was thinking also like the internet didn't kill retail.
No.
Like e-commerce is only maybe 30% of retail. Retail still exists. The internet didn't kill music companies either. They still rule Spotify, etc. So I like this idea of saying that, and it's interesting because I think that that's what's happening in the space as a whole. And for me, because I got into the space much later than you, and what I saw at first, which kind of bothered me, is this whole idea, or this whole ethos of saying it's us against them.
Yeah.
And why? I mean, I understand, maybe it's a way, and it's funny because in some ways you could think of it as like a little kid growing up, and when you see like your big brother or your father or whatever, and you want to be bigger, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna take over, etc. And then at one point or another, you're like, well, we're just like two human beings, and that we can coexist. And I think that that's kind of like the moment that we're in.
It's been a little too knives out in this space for the past decade. Accenture has, I'm going to get the number wrong at this point, but like 700,000 employees. Yeah. They're still Deloitte.
They fired a bunch like a couple of months
whatever.
Ago,
maybe it's 500 or 600 at this point, but it's a very large number, and yet there is a very large number of other firms that provide similar services. Yeah. Finance is the backbone of just about every human interaction in some shape or form. Mm-hmm. It's a gigantic space, and a rising tide floats all boats. Mm. I don't know if you were following, there was this debate maybe a month ago at this point, I've lost track of time, about DeFi Llama and RWA.xyz not putting figures, stats out there. And I think this whole tribalism in the space is doing everyone a disservice because you're continually pitting people against each other instead of saying, well, no, look, what JP Morgan did with JP Coin is not the way we would do a stable coin, but that's an interesting experiment for different reasons. They're trying to solve fundamentally different problems. They have different constraints and different opportunities. They're both on chain. Yeah. Why would you look down your nose on that and say, oh, it's not totally permissionless, maximally? It doesn't matter. All these things will rotate on chain. That is an opening up and the world collectively coming to a similar cadence of the new way going forward that is net beneficial for everybody. So I'd rather that all these things, the DeFi Llamas of the world, the RWA.xyzs, all of them, just list everything. Put it all out there and let the reader understand the problem that they're trying to solve and why that meant they went in a different direction than somebody else. And we would all get smarter from being more sort of objective and thoughtful about it.
Yeah. And I think you're serving different users, different use cases. And I mean, just like, if we go back to that parallel with the internet, not everything will survive. There will be, things that don't work. But for sure, innovation comes with, people creating new things. And so you have to, help it develop. I think that's how we see it a lot at Ledger, because being a platform, you want to, enable as many, number one, users on the one hand, but also have as many apps as possible, because that's kind of also has been in some ways the missing piece. We're talking about stablecoin, bridging that gap and kind of being this new, real use case, etc. for users of crypto, but there's a lot of other use cases that are going to come down the pipe that are already existing. You were talking about figures and for home loans and all these different things there are a lot of things happening now on chain that didn't happen just a couple of years back, but they come through that innovation. Can you describe a little bit what's different about the Canton Network? So back to what we're talking about, so it's an L1, but how is it different from other L1s?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit earlier about just the way that it grows horizontally. So we have unlimited horizontal scalability. Yep. It's kind of like when Netflix wanted to start streaming movies, they didn't have to bid for bandwidth away from Skype, and that has in many ways allowed the internet to just constantly grow at whatever pace it wants to grow. So we have the same capacity in Canton to just keep adding capacity to the ecosystem. But the key differentiator really that I still can't believe after a decade of doing this that has been an afterthought for people is privacy.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that Zcash is finally getting its moment. One of the last things I tried to do at Cumberland on my way out was to help launch Zcash. I don't know if they ever did. I wasn't there to see it all the way through. But I've always been a big supporter of that ecosystem. And even, Zuko tells the story better than I do, but going back to the chat rooms in the early days with Satoshi, everyone would always be like, this isn't really achievable without privacy. So the transparency's always been a bug. And yet everybody has replicated that design feature. And I get it. It's very hard to design for privacy. But that's really one of the leading differentiators. I think our tokenomics are highly differentiated as well. I think about, and again, this is with the benefit of hindsight. When I look at ETH, they wanted to be Bitcoin with smart contracts at their early days. And they found product market fit being more of an application ecosystem. And everybody downstream of ETH has copied really ETH's tokenomics. And if you are an app ecosystem, not a validator or proof of work ecosystem, I think you need to think about your rewards going in different ways. So in Canton, 2/3 of all the rewards that will ever exist go to users and applications as measured by their fee generation on chain. And that's really created an incredible flywheel of an early ecosystem of people building for the network. And I think that it's just a lot more sustainable on a long-term basis. The example I like to give on this is, generally products monetize the value that they provide to people. And I think stablecoins, the velocity of stablecoins, it started with access, but as they're going to grow into the multi-trillions, it'll be about velocity. But they don't charge transaction fees anywhere. And that seems like an existential mismatch. But on Canton, every time a stablecoin moves, there's effectively interchange in the network that produces revenue for the application. So things like transaction fees are built in. And I've heard that a lot of the wrapped Bitcoin protocols struggle with a revenue model because it doesn't have the built-in yield like cash does in a stablecoin. It's really popular to talk about tokenizing stocks, but for the wrapping entities or the people bringing this into the network, how do they make money? It's not obvious. And interchange would make a lot of sense, and it's just built into the network.
Yeah, and as we've seen last week or the week before with the 90 billion of value like being wiped out, etc. Like all the wrap products and the tokenized stocks, etc. were part of like that, right? Like we're part of like the issue that at the core.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to segue away from the feature of the ledger, but the feature of our community is that having that deep TradFi liquidity and building products the right way would improve the collateral characteristics of a lot of these assets. So like at the extreme, if you imagine I could only create a wrapped Apple stock on a Monday at noon, just to paint a hyperbolic example, then you would expect that the price of that token would drift very far away from the actual underlying stock. But if you had the real underlying stock on chain at the register where it's been created, and you have the 20 largest market makers and APs that trade that stock, and you have the lending protocol at the place that's plumbed into all the existing custodians, and you had perfect redeem flows between the two, you produce a secondary asset that doesn't drift away from the NAV. Same thing for stable coins. You can't really at scale create stable coins 24/7. Saturday, you need a lot of stable coins. You might be out of luck in a lot of instances. So that connection between the depth and liquidity of the real assets and these experimental things, I think, is a very important connection to me.
So today, you already process like trillions in in monthly repo financing. Can you give us a little bit of an example of how a network like Canton can create like a seamless experience for a process like asset settlement, collateral management?
Yeah, I mean, the repo, it's funny, that it's a big number in absolute terms. In TradFi terms, it's a meaningless number. So depending on who I'm speaking to, if I'm in front of a bank, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, but it's, it's just getting started. It's going really well. It's growing nicely. But then, if you're talking to a crypto native, they're like, huh, you're hundreds of times bigger than all the other networks in this regard. You're like, yes, but understand it's still a small number. So it's a great data point, but there's still a lot to do. So, just to go back on the stablecoin thing, when we talk about repo and stablecoins, a lot of people have a tendency to think that it's really just about using stablecoin as the cash leg in the repo. But I think the much more interesting use case is being able to create and redeem the stablecoin with the treasury. Yeah. And so in Canton, the way this would work is you would have, an entity that may or may not be running their own infrastructure and their own application, and it might be technically distinct in physical segregation from some of the rest of the stuff. But I could compose a transfer of a treasury with the creation of a stablecoin or the transfer of a stablecoin, guarantee the atomicity of that. And then we'll move the treasury under whatever rules the treasury moves, and only certain entities will see what took place there. And the same thing on the stablecoin side. It'll move or be created, and we'll guarantee the atomicity of that so that there's no chance that the treasury got delivered and the stablecoin didn't get created or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And what that allows you to do is create a very tight operational system that can run 24/7. Because the worst thing that can happen is it didn't work. The worst thing that can happen today in finance is Lehman goes bankrupt on a Sunday and I made a payment on a Friday and I just paid a bankrupt entity. That sort of stuff happens a lot. And that happens with bridging. That happens whenever you're trying to bridge across ecosystems. So that atomicity means it's really an automated process. Someone has to go unplug and turn it back on if something happens. But otherwise, it's good. And so that means now you can think about, hey, that Lehman scenario, I'm holding cash, but maybe I want to be in treasuries. And I could do that on a Saturday afternoon. So being able to connect those worlds together, I think, is a really critical step change for the on-chain ecosystem, but also for our capital markets.
So one of the things that you guys have been able to do, which is really impressive, is to onboard some of the biggest names in finance. So we're in Paris. We'll talk about BNP Paribas, of course, my bank. We can talk about that later, but how much I love them. HSBC. And yet, when so at Ledger, we also talk to a lot of financial institutions and banks about, their security setup, et cetera. And what we see is that there's still this level of fear around, human error and not being able to claw back, a mistake, and that human error. What did it take to convince them? What do you think brought them on board? I'm going to use this for me to help me in my in my discussion with them.
Well,
what is your secret sauce?
I don't think there's any magic to it, as I'm sure you're directly aware. You sit down with them, and they're just going to build a very coherent process. Mm-hmm. And hallmark to that process are going to be things like redundancy. Mm. So if I have an on-chain policy, I want an off-chain policy. Mm-hmm. If I have a certain group of people that approve the on-chain stuff, I want a different group of people for the off-chain stuff, and I want 4 eyes everywhere. So if you have a perfect complement that's integrated into the ecosystem that has the same controls and capabilities that you would have on-chain, that produces a sort of systemic redundancy and continuity that they're going to design. But a lot of it is process. It's like, going back to your first question, they're not just sitting on your transfer waiting for it to happen. There's a series of processes that they're going to go through. So the tighter that those are, the more resilient that they are, the more in sync with each other that they are, then the faster that process can go through, and the safer and more secure they'll feel about doing it. So it's just doing the work. It's just going through it with them and making sure that you tick every box that they need.
And the fact that you're basically not giving them, you're giving something that's malleable and that they can kind of adapt to their needs, right? You're not saying it's one size fits all, you either come in or you don't. They're actually able to build their own kind of engine or their own policies around what they want to use, right?
Yeah, I mean, this heterogeneity is the hallmark of the internet. And we have many banks that look like they do roughly the same thing. They don't look the same under the hood at all. Mm. Rightly or wrongly, they've all gone in different directions for whatever their different requirements may be. If you show up and you go, there's one way to do this, and there's one way to build something, and there's one way to configure something, it's very difficult because it may not fit into the way that they do anything else. Mm-hmm. So to have the ability to match their process or their requirements means you don't need regulatory changes, you don't need exceptions with their security team, and so the more your products and your capabilities match their ability to get the outcome that they require, then the faster you'll get to market. Mm.
So you've brought these guys on, and that's amazing. And I think that's a revolution in the space, and something that, I think so many people have been talking about, bringing TradFi onto on-chain, and they still are, but now you guys have actually done it, and I'm sure that it's only the beginning of the journey, but at least the journey started. But you've also done a lot of work, and you and I have actually worked together on this for the partnership between Ledger and Canton, but to bring on a lot of people from the industry, from the crypto space, who are going to bring different things to the ecosystem. So later today we'll be on a panel with our friends from Kaiko and from Figment, but you also are working with Kiln. You're working with, there's probably hundreds of people, maybe not hundreds, but a few tens of different partners that you work with.
It's a nice list, yes.
Yeah, it's a nice, and it's kind of like a who's who in crypto.
Yeah.
Why was it important for you and for the ecosystem? Because I understand that for it to work, you need assets, you need partners, and then you need apps that and users, right? They're going to use the apps developed by the partners. So what was the thinking when you were kind of architecting the whole idea of what the network should look like? Why was it important to bring on all these partners?
I don't think it's a surprise to you that I would say that you have an incredible customer base, and your customers very well and what matters to them. And it's important that if you want to bring people into an ecosystem, you meet them where they are and what their expectations are. So your audience loves what you guys do, rightfully so. It provides a lot of protection for them. And they want to access another ecosystem that has some features. They don't just want an integration. So when we go and we work with someone like Ledger, we sit down and we say, well, how do we activate your audience? What do they care about? What's important to them? There's no way I could figure that out. How long have you Pascal's been at this almost as long as I have.
Pascal, he created Kaiko, which was,
right.
I think, before Ledger, and he wrote the first check. He was the seed investor in Ledger, which was 11 years ago. So, yeah.
So there's no shortage of people that have been around about a decade in the space, and they really know their audience. And you want to be able to onboard that ecosystem in a way that matters to them. You don't want to just be the 37th EVM L2 that's in a list. You want to be, something interesting and useful and deliver some value. And there's no way you could do that alone. You have to do it through your partners.
And when you went out and started talking to them, have you found the fact that the network got built, so it created a bit of a flywheel, and then maybe at the beginning you had to call on people, and now people are calling you?
Yeah. There are many entities. I'm not going to name any names that I gave them, one of the first looks, and they're we'll wait to see if this is a thing, and now there's a waiting list. So now they're in the queue, and never underestimate someone's ability to pretend that you owe them something they didn't do in the first place. But no, listen, very, very lucky that things are doing really well right now, but it's entirely thanks to the partners. All the momentum that we have are the partner understanding that there's a differentiated opportunity for them, a bit of a tiredness of supporting all these things that are roughly the same, and there's, I think, when we approach a partner, we approach people that we believe are similarly adults in the space, and understand that it's not just about infighting and picking and choosing, which ecosystem to run through, but instead we've been talking about this a long time, let's make this happen. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure we have the right partners, and really delivering on the promise that we're always talking about.
And what's interesting is that, when I look at the discussions that we've had and our teams, because we went very deep, obviously, in the partnership, And that really came out. I know that our engineering teams met up in Zurich, and what came out of it was that they really see things the same way, and they really enjoy working together. And I think that comes from a bunch of different things. It's good people, et cetera, et cetera. So you hire good people, we hire good people, that's great. But I think they also see the world kind of in a similar manner. And when you're talking about privacy, it's one of the core tenets of Ledger, right? Security, privacy, it's really, really important for us. And obviously it's at the heart of what you guys have built. So I think that's, that makes a good partnership, is that we look in the same direction. So
I'm not some grand poobah visionary that figured this stuff out. These are hard-learned lessons. So it's not surprising to me that it's kind of subtly in the zeitgeist already. It's just that we've been able to articulate it because we've been trying to solve this specific thing for so long. So when you have people that are objectively really looking at the space and not just being religious about whatever they have in their bag at any time, like it taps into something that they understood already and that they just couldn't quite put their finger on. It's like when you read a really good book and it just really resonates with you, sort of a thing. It's not something you didn't necessarily know, but it's just like the way it gets put together can be crystallizing. So yeah, your team's obviously a very objective, very thoughtful group. And so just kind of, I think it was like, oh, refreshing. This is, I've had this feeling for a long time and this makes sense.
But and just like going into the privacy piece also, because I think that there's this, people make this mistake of mixing privacy and anonymity, and they're two very different things, really. Yeah. And especially when you're talking to financial institutions, they need privacy for sure, because like they don't want people to see all the transactions that they're doing, etc. Or then if you start like building, bringing on chain, I don't know, payment systems, or even I think you could do payroll, etc. Like you don't want to show that either. But that doesn't mean you have to have anonymity, right? They're two very different.
Very different things. Yeah. Definitely very different things. Like, I said earlier, I'm a big Zcash supporter. In the context of creating borderless, censorship-resistant, government-resistant cryptocurrency. If you are a regulated institution in some shape or form that is issuing a stable coin onto a network, and the regulator goes, prove to me that what's in your bank account is in circulation, it's a near impossible task if you're talking about using a zero knowledge or an FHE implementation. And there are all these attempts to try to say, oh, we'll get viewing keys, but it's just kind of like turtles all the way down through the whole thing. And even then, it's not even the full picture. So privacy is this complex, overlapping, asymmetric set of views. When I go to my doctor and I pay for the doctor, I don't want him to find out how much money I have in my bank account. I don't want the bank to know why I went to the doctor. So it's not just at rest or in a simple transfer. It's in composition with other stuff. And, who can see what, under what conditions, it can get very complicated. So the machinery to design that protocol and for a developer to design what they need in their asset, and again, not lose this global interoperability, is a very tricky thing to get right. And it's not anonymity. I think it's very easy to think about the two extremes. Everybody sees everything or nobody sees anything about it. But in the middle, there's so much nuance and complexity. It's tricky to kind of find something easy enough for someone to work with, but still delivers those much needed features.
So let's zoom out a little bit because, look at the big picture, because the open event that we're in, we're going to be spending a lot of time discussing like the next era of digital ownership. Foundational part of that vision is the tokenization of real world assets like RWAs. How is Canton setting the stage for entirely new financial products that simply couldn't exist before? There's
like two categories of answers to this, and too often I think people pit them against each other as or, but I think it's an and. So there are the people that are saying, we're going to get the real asset on chain, in some instances, maybe for the first time, like the super states of the world. And that will open up a whole new ecosystem of stuff. That is very important. That's what we do with most of our customers when we work with the large registers and the large banks. That is the legally binding, true, perfected security position in that asset. There's a massive ecosystem for that. Just TradFi has reasons to do repo on a Saturday or in the middle of the day. For an hour. There are many, many reasons to have this 24/7 rail that is composable with everything else, globally speaking, on the TradFi side. Really clever ways you could do like synthetic ETFs. Lots of very interesting things that you could do on that side. I also think that there's a tremendous amount of demand for the wrapper permissionless version of that. What's really popular right now are prediction markets. I think that prediction markets have come and gone a few times in my 15 years in the space. My theory about why they don't really kind of scale beyond where they are right now is that your outcomes are bounded. So if you're really right, you still only make the delta on your percentage bet versus one. And the other thing is that the liquidity is not always great. So if instead I could ask an AI agent, I want to bet on a surprise 50 bips cut from the FOMC tomorrow, put together a portfolio of things where price should move, you could get an unbounded return on being right on these events. So I think structuring is really where this is going to be very interesting, and structuring in kind of a permissionless way. So I think it's both. But to be crystal clear, the first one is many orders of magnitude bigger than the second.
Okay.
So it's not like, where is Canton setting up? We're setting up to be on the real world side of stuff, because it's also an enabler for the second one. If you have perfect, 24/7 creation and redemption across these things, helps you produce a higher quality permissionless wrapped asset. But it all starts with solving the liquidity problems on the real world side. So having the real assets, having the real lending markets that are deep, that have all the really large passive liquidity, getting all of that set up, it helps build better permissionless products. So it's both, but our focus primarily and overwhelmingly by effort and go-to-market is on the real world side of stuff.
Yeah. And how fast is that going?
It's like the 10-year overnight success sort of thing. Right now, things are going incredibly fast.
Right.
There are some names that will come to market in the next 6 months that will blow people's minds. And the scale at which they come to market will completely catch people off guard. But some of these names have been on our cap table for a decade.
Yeah.
And we've been working through all sorts of problems with them for a very long time. So the moons have definitely aligned.
Yeah. It's funny because, one of the things that I've seen in the market, because I think for a long time, and again, we'll make this parallel with the internet where, the incumbents felt very slow, and they were. If you talk to retailers, et cetera, they're like, Amazon's nothing, et cetera. And then they had to hurry very fast. The difference in the crypto space that I see is that a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, banks, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're talking about. In my discussions with them, maybe they haven't come out of the woods, but they have major teams and really smart people working on these things and have been working on them for years, not just, since Trump got elected, right? Like this is something that, for a lot of financial institutions, they're maybe not fully ready, but they've been working on it for a while. And I think that's a misconception. I think that, they're just behind it, or they don't want to look at it, et cetera, et cetera. I think.
Well, they also, I think, completely mischaracterize why the investments that they've made are so valuable. So people like to hate on the JP Coin thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's appropriate. I think that was, even though JP Coin itself, and by the way, it's doing very well right now, and it took a while, but even if you were very negative demand deposit tokens and JP Coin in particular, they have an engineering team that knows what they're doing.
They do.
They have the infrastructure. They have a line of business that knows how to monetize the space. They have business development. They have marketing. Legal team knows how to interact with the space. So if an opportunity presented itself to zig or zag in a certain way,
you can do it.
They are fully prepared and positioned to do that.
Yeah.
Compare that to someone that was like, I don't know if this is such a good deal. I don't know if I want to do it. And they don't have even like a person who would hire people to go after an opportunity. It's going to be very difficult for them to be as nimble and opportunistic as JP Morgan can be.
For sure.
So I think that people don't understand that, in the startup space, we're completely unapologetic about, I went down this path and it didn't work and I'm going down this path. But the company's been growing and I'm learning and I'm getting a little bit smarter. But when an incumbent does the same thing, it's like, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They made a mistake. They ended up in the wrong place. Yeah. And it's the journey for all of them, and it's building the muscle and having the capability.
For sure. And actually, you see it across the financial world. It's just like that. There's a lot more of a zoom on them because a lot of them are public companies, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, for sure. And it's okay. And I think you do learn from your mistakes. And sometimes you kill products, and every great company, the GAFAMs, et cetera, the biggest tech companies have, a backyard filled with projects that they killed, et cetera, and they have to, yeah.
Amazon phone.
Yeah, Amazon, yeah. Among
ESPN phone.
As at Google, when Google launched their I don't even remember the names of them, but they launched all these social platforms at some point to catch up with Facebook, and all of those are dead, but then they landed on YouTube, and that's become their social platform. So it actually does work at one point or another. Maybe sometimes you just have to go buy somebody for $1 billion. So you're 10 years into your journey, which is amazing. And if you zoom out another 10 years and the full realization of what you think Canton could be, gets realized, how does it change the world of finance fundamentally? I think 2035.
Man, I got to tell you, if my journey's done in 10 years, we're going to be way ahead of schedule. I kind of been jokingly saying I'm about a third of the way through.
Okay.
Think about the internet.
Yeah,
it takes a long time to matriculate through everything. So we will make material improvement over the next 10 years, but I wouldn't say I'll be done. I think the most obvious thing to me is that the world will be a 24/7 operation.
Yep.
There's a lot of really strong financial organizations that might have presence around the world, but they're not necessarily a 24/7 operation, especially not in their capital market side. You have like different silos at different hours, but coordinating into one big 24/7. So that to me is going to be the most obvious change, is that the plumbing underneath the user experience will be able to move at the same cadence as the user experience.
Yep.
But the sort of my hope and expectation for this is that the friction that is in our plumbing of the capital markets today is ultimately a tax on productivity and humanity.
Yep.
And I think what has driven the consistent GDP growth numbers is innovation over time. And I think this will be the next big GDP growth unlock, because you have so much capital sitting unproductive, locked up. The way we hedge this latency is we put cash we put it here. We go, okay, if something goes wrong, this is the money that we take to make everyone whole.
Yeah.
So there's this massive amount of collateral, capital, money, friction, latency that is all from this just hop between
the T2s, the T3s,
all of that stuff. Yeah. Right. And even if it stays T2 because it's the right way to do netting or like all that sort of stuff, there are many reasons that things might be T1 or T2 that is not just because the plumbing isn't at that speed. Yeah. Being able to move all the collateral at that pace and the margining at every hour, 24/7, the amount of risk we're going to be able to take out of the system structurally will return a lot of capital to go be more productive. And that to me is what really motivates me to do this. It's not every day that you can spend a lifetime and maybe wake up and have changed kind of the trajectory of financial markets or humanity in a certain sense. And it's a very egotistical thing to say. I said very cautiously, but it's an opportunity we're chasing.
That's what you want to do, right? You want to do things that are going to be game changers, and removing friction, whatever kind of friction it is for humanity, is definitely like a good one. So if you were talking to, and you could, maybe you'll meet some of them today, a bank or financial institution that hasn't really started their journey on chain, what would be like the one advice that you would give them?
Do something.
Yeah.
But also partner, because there's this I don't know, I'll be mean for a minute and say it's a bit of a disease that like it's DIY.
Yeah.
And the problem is that anyone coming into the space is very late right now. It doesn't feel like it, but the amount of momentum built into the people that have been there already is very real. And so partner, because you definitely don't need to do everything yourself. Especially someone like key management, your interface into a system, running nodes, getting reporting data, understanding how to interact with these types of ledgers from a data perspective.
Securing your assets.
Securing. It's just the policies of how someone would interact with these systems. There's so many hard lessons learned. Don Wilson from DRW loves to call crypto Little League, which I really love, because like Little League, it's the same sport, it matters, but no one's getting a $100 million contract in Little League. But crypto has mattered more than enough that there have been some very hard lessons learned. Yeah. And being able to migrate that into TradFi is going to be a very, very valuable thing. So you do not need to reinvent the wheel. You can bring in people to help you. And maybe you'll find later you want to DIY it, but start with partners. Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you do. We often have, and I think that happens a lot on the product side and the engineering side, thinking, oh yeah, we can do this, we can build this. Like if you go to your engineering team or your product team, at a financial institution, it's like, yeah, we can do it. they can do parts of it maybe, but clearly there are other people that have been doing exactly the thing they want to do for 10 years, for example, and that can help them get there quicker. I fully agree with that.
Or even if you can do it, is it really the right ROI for your people to be doing that thing that company already does well at scale?
Yeah.
I think that calculus is often off. But do something. It doesn't matter.
I like that. So thank you so much for your time. It was super interesting. Enjoy your time in Paris.
I will, thank you.
And the next few weeks, because they're going to be big for Canton, and we'll be following along and very happy to partner with you guys.
Thank you.